Muy buenas noches, gente. Bienvenidos a esta nueva entrega de Protagonistas del cómic. Yo soy Kyle, esto es el canal Kyle Rayner Reviews. Bienvenidos. Es una noche muy especial, como varias otras que hemos tenido, pero esta es especial porque tenemos a una persona legendary. Podríamos decir que es legendary. Voy a hacer entrar al señor Mario, que me va a acompañar.
Hola gente, muy buenas noches a todos, la verdad que sí, vamos a tener un programa precioso como todo lo que hacemos, mi querido.
Buenísimo, Marito. Saludo brevemente al chat, a Pamflin, a Cinecomics, a Takes, a Esteban Calvi, a Gabriel Rojo, que es el primer miembro de los Green Lantern Corps, que ya es parte de la membresía del canal, a Gabriel Balseca y el señor Takes. Y vamos a presentar ahora...
Antes que nada, dejen su buen like, suscríbanse y compartan, por favor, que esto es genial.
Acuérdense, sí, por favor, acá abajo, suscríbanse, dejen su like. Y sobre todo, prepárense porque una noche espectacular, porque vamos a presentar, y ahora vamos a hablar en inglés, y lo tengo que presentar así. Ladies and gentlemen, the legendary Tom DeFalco.
Hola, Argentina.
Hola, Mr. DeFalco.
Thank you, Mr. DeFalco.
Thanks for inviting me, gentlemen.
It's a pleasure. It's a great honor to have you here, and such a legend in comics. It's a dream come true for us.
Did Ron Friends tell you to call me a legend?
Yes.
I'm just asking.
Yeah,
that miserable guy. I'm gonna go.
He said that there was a story behind, and maybe you can tell us when we
There is a story. There is a story behind that. Many years ago, I was going to do some work for Michael Jackson. You've heard of Michael Jackson, and I found out that in his contracts there was a clause that basically you had to refer to him anytime you referred to Michael Jackson, and you had to refer to him as the king of pop. So you could, you'd have to say, I'm working for Michael Jackson, the king of pop. You always had to stick that king of pop in there. And I said to Ron, this guy created his own term. He calls himself the king of pop. I mean, if he can call himself the king of pop, I can start calling myself the legendary Tom DeFalco. And Ron goes, yeah, sure, Mr. Legendary now. So after that, anytime Ron would call me up, he'd say, "Can I speak to Mr. Legend, please?" And then whenever we would be interviewed on anything, and people would say, "Oh, we have Tom DeFalco," Ron Friends would say, "No, it's the legendary Tom DeFalco." And he did it so many times that at some point people started referring to me as the legendary. So it was a joke that got out of hand.
Well, you're legendary, sir. You're a legend. You're a legend, and also you're a hero for all of us.
Well, I don't know if I'm a hero for anybody, but a legend. Being a legend just means that you're an old fart who isn't in the grand scheme of things anymore. All right.
So, Mr. DeFalco, please, can you tell us about your beginnings in comics?
My beginnings are, it's very simple. All my life I knew I wanted to be a writer. When I was in school, I started to write short stories. Even managed to sell a few, and worked for public relations company. The comics, the college PR things, the college newspapers, the local newspaper I started to work for them too. So I was doing all sorts of different writings, and I even did a weekly comic strip while I was in school. And when I got out, my goal was to do a daily comic strip, because I thought, wow, that would be great to, do a daily comic strip.
Yeah.
And I also loved comics. I'd always loved comics, and I thought, well, maybe I could get a job in a comic book company. So I got a big portfolio together, sent the resume out, and I heard from Archie Comics, and they invited me up for an interview, and they gave me a job working in their production editorial department. And that's where I basically learned the craft of comics. And then from, at Archie, I started to do other freelance. I started to write for Archie, and then later on I started to write for a company called Charlton, doing things like Scooby-Doo and the Flintstones, and yeah, those are a bunch of things. I don't know if those have any of my stories in them. They might.
They're yours. They are yours.
They are? Okay, cool. Right.
Sir,
The first, they are the first comic books that you wrote for Archie Comics, and it was these are your beginnings, actually.
Oh, I early in when I worked for Archie, they didn't have credits. Initially, they didn't have credits. And I kept trying to convince the company to give credits to the writers and artists, and they finally agreed to do it just as I was leaving the company. Marvel had offered me an exclusive writing contract, so I thought, oh man, it's a chance to work for Marvel. I should take it. So I went to work for Marvel, and I never found out if my last bunch of stories got credits or not. I noticed that every once in a while I flip through the digest books. I'm still on Archie's mailing list. They send me the digest book, and a lot of my stories are credited to Frank Doyle, who was really the greatest of the Archie writers, and or George Glatter, who's probably the second greatest of the things. Hey, if they think my stories were those guys, man, I must have been doing something right, because those guys were great, really great.
Sir, I want to ask you. This is a really key question: Betty or Veronica?
That I think that there's a great allure to Veronica, because she's always distant. She's hard to get, but Betty is the girl next door, and Betty is the one that we, if we, just open our hearts, she's the one we're always going to fall in love with.
Our girlfriend.
Yeah, she's going to be the one. So I always go for Betty. I figure everybody's in love with Betty.
Mr. Falco, have you seen the TV show of Riverdale?
Yes, I saw the first few episodes, first 4 or 5 episodes, and I realized that was not for me. I was not the audience for that show. I think it's doing terrific. It's gone. I think 5 seasons. It's spawned at least 2 other shows. So they're doing a terrific job on it. I'm just not the right audience for it. So.
And after this work, you began to work with DC, or you have another work on other editorials?
Well, we're just talking comic books. I started to write for DC. I think I was still doing the Charlton stuff, the Archie Charlton, and then started to do some stuff for DC. And then somewhere along the line, while I was working for DC, I think I did my first Marvel story. I was flittering about. I have a small attention span, so I just flitter about here and there. I did a few stories for Marvel, and eventually, they liked my stuff enough that Jim Shooter offered me an exclusive writing contract to come over to write, comic books exclusively for him for a while. And then while I was there, at one point, Jim Shooter came up to me and said, "Listen, I'm reorganizing the editorial staff. How'd you like to be an editor?" Because he said he knew I had done editing at Archie, and I said, "Ah, man, Jim, I haven't had a full-time job in years. I don't even know if I could do it anymore." And Jim said, "Sure you can. Come on." He says, "Yeah, you got to help me out here." And he says, "Listen, I only need you for maybe 6 months. You could do 6 months, right?" And I thought, yeah, I could do 6 months. What the heck? So I agreed to come on the editorial staff for what I thought would be about 6 months, and it ended up to be closer to 20 years.
So, my God.
A lifetime, almost a lifetime.
Yeah, I kept getting prepared to, okay, I've done everything. It's getting around time to leave, and then something else would always pop up.
It was funny working like those days, right? That kind of stories, that kind of characters, because it was revolutionary that days.
In those days, it was fabulous to work in Marvel Comics. The bullpen, we had a real bullpen. Stanley used to always talk about the Marvel bullpen, but most of those guys worked at home. At the time that we had it, Jim Shooter was the editor-in-chief. He brought in a staff of just fabulous editors. Louise Simonson, had Al Milgram, Denny O'Neil, brought in Larry Hama, and I'm sure I'm from, Jim Salcrop. I'm forgetting a bunch of people. Sorry about that. But he assembled a great staff, and we worked very, very hard, but we also had a lot of fun. It was really a goofball situation. We had Marie Severin was on staff. John Romita was on staff. Frank Giacoya, Jack Abel. We just had a bunch of great people, and it was a real pleasure. We worked like 10-hour days, 12-hour days, but we didn't care. We were having a great time. We were doing comic books.
Yeah.
And did you get a chance to meet, for example, Jack Kirby on Marvel?
Not at Marvel. I met Jack Kirby at a couple of comic book conventions. I don't want to exaggerate my discussions with Kirby, because I think I ran across him maybe a half a dozen times. Always a gentleman, always a great guy. Always, filled with stories. Jack Kirby is a real legend. I'm lucky, very lucky, because I got to work with Stan Lee a lot. And Stan Lee, another legend. Stan Lee, the personality he projected, that was Stan Lee. The only difference between that thing and Stan Lee at 10 o'clock at night sitting in a bar was he was a little bit more subdued. But he was always the same, happy guy. He had a magic power that whenever you were talking to Stan Lee, he made you feel like you were the most important person in the world.
He was full of energy, right?
What?
He was full of energy with everything. He listened every ideas that you told him.
Yes.
Every ideas, every plot pitches of something.
He would listen to everything you had to say, and then he would rattle off ideas like, I used to say that every 10 minutes, Stanley would rattle off 100 ideas, and maybe 50 of them you'd go, oh, these are terrible. and maybe 25 you go, I don't know. And then 10 of them you go, yeah, you could do something with that. And 5 of them you go, wow, those are really good. But, 10 minutes later, you give you another 100 ideas. And like I said, 5 of those 100, man, they were all golden. I used to say that, hanging out with Stan Lee was like going to college without having to pay tuition. Because I would learn so much. And Stan, he would just rattle things off. He and I would be walking down the hallway, look at a cover and go, yeah, that background doesn't work. And you say, well, why, Stan? He goes, well, look, and then he'd explain why it didn't work, or look at a cut thing. Just, he'd just walk down, you'd hand, a bundle of comics, and he'd flip through them like dealing cards, and then he'd stop at the one cover that didn't work, and he'd tell you why it didn't work.
Oh my God.
I mean, I was always in awe, of the wonderful person he was. And he, people often say to me, Ditko created everything, Kirby created everything. And I think, you guys didn't know Stan, because I look at the Stanley, the Spider-Man characters, and Peter Parker, that was Stan Lee. Always insecure, always second guessing himself, always wondering, am I doing it right? J. Jonah Jameson, that was Stan Lee. Sometimes gruff, exuberant, sometimes cheap, sometimes.
Did he yell? Did he yell to the staff?
Like Jonah Jameson. And other times very generous. And I once pointed out to him, Aunt May was Stan Lee. And I said to him, yeah, I see so much of Aunt May in you. And he goes, what are you talking about, Aunt May? And then we're walking outside. He looks out, Tommy, it looks like it's cold. Is that cold warm enough for you? If it rains, do you have an umbrella? And I go, Aunt May.
And you said that he was like Jameson's J. Jonah. And who was Robbie Robertson?
That was also Stan, because Robbie was the cool-headed guy who would look at things objectively and say, this is right, this is wrong. That was also right. Stan. Stan was every one of those characters. It's really amazing, because I could see Stan in every one of those characters.
Oh, my God, it's amazing, right? It's amazing, sir, because we love all these characters, and you're saying he has all the personalities, and it's just great.
No, it's also amazing that the person that we met on screen with cameos, with interviews, it's so similar to the one you met in person, and it's not a character he's doing for the show. He was Stan Lee, and he was like that.
Yeah, that was Stan. The first night I really hung out with Stan, it's so late that I nobody can give me a hard time about. Marvel was having a big party at some comic book convention. It might have been San Diego, and I'm not a big party guy. So I'd go, I'd make my appearance, I'd shake a few hands, smile a bit, and then I'd try to sneak out as soon as I could. So I noticed there was an exit door out into a hallway. So I open the door, sneak out, and there's somebody in front of me, and I realize it's Stan. And Stan turns to me and he sees me coming out the door. He says, "Oh, Tommy, I was looking for the bathroom." And I said, "Yeah, I think there's one back at our hotel, right next to the bar." He goes, "I knew there was something about you I liked." And the two of us took off together. While everybody else was stuck at the party, which I'm sure they all had a wonderful time. Stan and I were sitting at a bar having a couple of drinks, and who joined us? Sergio Aragones. I ended up sitting between Sergio and Stan Lee, and spent the night laughing like crazy because it was just a wonderful time.
I know some anecdotes you have, Mr. Falco. That's what we love about these stories behind the scenes that we didn't have a chance to hear from other people that aren't the comic book creators. And since you spoke about that you work on comics, you also worked.
What?
Oh, I think he.
Is that right?
What?
Come
we
in.
lost you there for a second.
Te perdimos.
That also, besides comics, you worked for Mattel and Hasbro.
Well, I worked with Hasbro. Helping to develop the G.I. Joe and a little bit of Transformers, although the vast majority, 99% of G.I. Joe is done by Larry Hama. Got to give Larry Hama the credit because he was the genius. And Transformers, Bob Budiansky.
Yes.
I was just, an editor, a guy on the sidelines. Those are the guys that did all the heavy lifting. So I don't want to take too much credit from those guys.
Mr. De Falco, these two big franchise are very favorites here. A lot of fans here in Argentina, especially Transformers, and but G.I. Joe too. But it's great stories. Great stories.
Those guys did terrific work, and they were, two of our top selling comic books for many and many years. I was always surprised when Marvel gave up Transformers and G.I. Joe for a few, just gave them up. I thought that was a terrible thing. I felt the same way about Conan, but at least Marvel has Conan back.
When you were an editor on Marvel, did you got any relationship with the people at DC?
Yeah, I used to. All right. Here's a real secret behind comics. You know how the guys at Marvel don't like the guys at DC? It's not true.
No, of course not.
A bunch of us used to play poker every week. Every Friday we meet at Paul Levitz's house and play poker. A bunch of us used to on either Saturdays or Sundays get together in the summer and play volleyball. We were all a bunch of friends. We all got along. We all cared about comics. It was not, there was not the big separation. There were a couple of controversies that popped up that, you were either a Marvel guy or a DC guy, but, for the most part, everybody got along, which made sense because, I never felt I was competing with other writers. I always felt that when I was chosen for an assignment, it's because the editor thought that, I was the guy who could do a good job on that, or I was the guy who happened to walk down the hall when he needed somebody, one or the other. And I never felt I was, competing against other guys, and I don't think anybody else ever felt they were competing against me.
Mm-hmm.
I think what you're telling is because you were all comic book fans in the first place, and they got in the right job, in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, a lot of luck. I have to say a lot of luck.
And talent,
Yeah.
a lot of talents.
Well, maybe a little talent, but you know, I always felt I was the luckiest guy in creation because I always happened to be walking down the hall when somebody needed something.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are a lot of very talented people out there. Very talented people. Sometimes they let their egos get in the way of their talent because they're so impressed with their vision that they sometimes forget that you know, people who have no idea what you're trying to say are going to read that story, and they forget to, you know, sometimes they actually forget to tell the story that they want to tell.
Mm-hmm.
They forget to introduce the characters, and forget to tell, because they know the character so intimately. They figure the readers do too, but most readers don't. So it's our job to introduce our characters to people and let the readers understand why this story is important to the character. And if the story is important to the character and tells us something about the human condition, it'll be important to the readers too.
Yes, right.
So
So you have
now,
to summarize this, you have to leave the ego out, to put the ego out of the equation.
The ego must stay outside. The job is the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
My buddy Ron Friends, who I gather you guys interviewed at one point, and Ron, I think Ron is really one of the true masters of our comic book medium. I've you know, ridden on his coattails for many a year because the guy is just fabulous. So many times Ron and I would, you know, I'd call him or he would call me, and one of us would have an idea for a story, and we'd start discussing the story, and we'd keep discussing it, and it would evolve because you know, Ron and I are both idea factories. We just keep coming up with ideas, and then at the end, I don't know what I contributed. I don't know what he contributed. And the original idea has been thrown out, you know, 15 ideas ago. But we have something that we're very excited for. And I think, you know, one of the great things about working with Ron is he has absolutely no ego about, you know, no idea is too precious to him to not throw out if a better one comes along. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that's one of the reasons why, well, he's never going to see this. That's one of the reasons why I like.
Mr. Falco, now that you mentioned Ron Friends, I would like you to tell us about how you take on the writing duties on Spider-Man from Roger Stern and got to this.
All right. Well, when I was editing Spider-Man, I loved working with Roger Stern. He's a just total professional. I thought he had the best take on Peter Parker I had seen, you know, aside from Stan Lee. And at a certain point, I was, you know, moved up on the chain. I became executive editor. I couldn't edit the Spider-Man books anymore. Danny Fingroth's now editing them. One day, Danny comes into my office and he says to me, Roger's going to leave Spider-Man because he's got an opportunity to write the Avengers, and you know, he's been doing Spider-Man for a couple of years. He wants to write the Avengers now. And I said to him, "Oh man, you're going to be in trouble because only an idiot's going to follow Roger Stern." And he says, "Well, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. I need a writer. Now, part of my job was to keep track of all the creative people. So I reach over. I have a list of all the writers that are working for us. I go down the list and I start rattling off names of guys who I thought could do a good Spider-Man. And I'm rattling off names and going through the list. And I look up, and Danny has this stupid smile on his face. And I notice he's not taking notes. And I said, Danny, you're not taking notes. He says, I don't need to take notes. I know who I want to write Spider-Man already. And I said, if you know who you want, why are you wasting my time? And he says, well, you're the idiot who's going to replace Roger Stern. And I said to him, I can't write Spider-Man. I said, the Spider-Man voice is so particular, and his sense of humor is so, is so definite that I don't think I can write those jokes. I don't think I can do that sort of thing. And Danny laughed at me. He says, of course you can. You just got to try to do it. And he said that, listen, the first two plots, Roger did the first two plots. All you got to do is dialogue them. You've dialogued over Roger before. You know you can do that. So just do that and don't worry about it. And then we'll see if you can do your own stories. And that's how I got onto Spider-Man. I figured I was the fill-in writer until the real writer showed up.
And don't say that, sir. Don't say that, sir.
The cool thing is that he became from fill-in artist to full run artist, because your run is a long run on Spider-Man, and you're very particularly remembered because of Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man 252, when Spider-Man appears for the first time with his black suit. And can you tell us about how did you got to that point when you have to write the Spider-Man, and Spider-Man didn't have the original suit? It has another suit because of a toy line.
Well, it wasn't because of the toy line. Jim Shooter decided he was going to give Spider-Man a different suit because he thought it would be an exciting thing to do. And I remember, reading the plot, and with the costume, Spider-Man had all these new powers. And I walked to Jim and I said, all right, Spider-Man's, new suit, he can do this, he can do that, he can do the other thing. How does this work? And Jim turned to me and says, well, you're the writer, come up with something. And I said, oh, thanks a lot.
Yes, sir.
And I had these animal cards that explained to me how different animals and that sort of stuff. And I had just been reading about whales and symbiotes, and I thought, maybe it's a symbiote that hooks onto him. And I explained that whole concept to Ron Friends, and Ron said, you know how symbiotes work, right? And I said, yeah, I guess. He goes, okay. You just tell me what to draw, and I'll do it that way. We're working on issue 252, and the fans had heard that Spider-Man's going to get a new costume, and of course the fans hated the idea. They hated the idea. They sent in bundles of mail, to the point that the guy from the mailroom came in, dropped 2 sacks of mail on my desk, and said to me, I don't know what you did, but don't ever do it again.
Thank God Twitter didn't exist.
This is luckily. If the internet had existed then, this book would have been canceled before it came out. Because everybody was saying, I'll never read Spider-Man again. I'm going to drop the titles. I'm going to drop all the Marvel titles, this and that. At one point, Jim Shooter comes into me and says, what issue does Spider-Man get his new costume? And I said, 252. He says, get rid of it in 253. I said, Jim, we can't do that. He doesn't even get it for 8 issues until Secret Wars. He says, listen, everybody hates it. I said, yeah, okay, but they haven't seen it yet. comic book fans always hate what they haven't seen. They hear about it. Oh, I hate it. I hate it. Oh, Michael Keaton's going to be Batman. Oh, it's going to be terrible, terrible. Oh, George Clooney's going to be Batman. Oh, it's going to be terrible, terrible.
He was doing ER. He's a doctor.
It doesn't matter who. Oh no, my God. Oh, it's horrible. And I said to him, don't worry about it. And he says, so when are you going to get rid of it? I said, we're going to wait 8 issues. We're going to wait for the month that he gets it in Secret Wars, and that'll be the end. And he says, if sales go down, it's going to be your butt, because you could be fired off the book. And I thought, hey, I'm only the film writer anyway. I'm definitely going to be fired off the book. What do I care?
I'm passing through.
Yeah, that's it. Hey, it's not gonna affect me. And the time came. We got to the end, and Spiderman. And by then, once the book came out, suddenly all the fans loved the new costume. Suddenly, we're getting mail. Oh, don't ever change the costume, because if you do, I'll stop reading Spider-Man. I'll never buy another Marvel comic book. Oh, it's horrible. Don't do that. I don't know if you've heard this, but comic book fans are a cowardly and superstitious lot.
You create the beast.
Yes.
Because the other symbiote, the big one, the Venom, and the other things, then from that story. So
a lot of things came from those stories, yes.
Also a lot of new characters, like Silver Sable, the Rose. You got a lot of creative freedom for character creation.
Well, that's something Ron Friends and I, we have in common. We always feel we should do that. If we're on a book, they're hiring us to be creators, so we should create. We should add to the characters, add to the universe, add to the help build the world around the character. So we're always creating new villains, creating new supporting cast. That's like, I always thought that was my job. So whatever book I do, I'm always coming up with new villains and stuff like that. And the fans are always complaining, oh, this is terrible. Why don't you bring back Dr. Octopus? Why don't you do this? Why don't you bring back so-and-so? And I'm thinking, because you read those stories already. We want to create new stories.
Mr. Falco, I'm going to ask you, then I'm going to leave Mario to ask his question. I'm going to ask you something that I ask Ron Friends. That was, what do you think about the black suit? Because it was like a legend that the black suit was designed for people who was bored of drawing Spider-Man webbing through all his costume.
Oh, no. Had nothing to do with that. The original idea for a black suit came from a fan called Randy Schuler. He'd written in a plot where Spider-Man gets a brand new costume. They actually did Randy's story recently, in the last couple of years. Schuler liked the idea, so he bought the plot. And then he said to me, I was the editor of Spider-Man, see if you can shape this plot into an actual story that we can publish. And I worked with Randy for a bunch of months. And Randy had a basic idea, but he didn't really know how to structure a story. And we couldn't really structure it to get an actual story out of it. And Randy's idea was basically that, over the years, Spider-Man's costume had become red and blue, but it had originally been red and black. And when I became the editor, it became red and black. Randy hadn't been reading the book, and his idea was, we're going to make it red and black. It'll be a black suit. And I said, yeah, Randy, it's been a black suit for the last 2 years. You got to do more for it. Anyway, when we were doing Secret Wars, Shooter said, "Oh yeah, we had this idea for this black suit." And he read over the plot and goes, "Yeah, no, we can't use any of this." And then he said, "I'm going to talk to some artists." And he went to about 4 or 5 artists, and he said, "I want you to design a new costume for Spider-Man that is primarily black." And the only one I saw was the one by Mike Zeck, which was the one that Shooter liked. And he said, "Oh yeah, I like this one," and that was the one he got. That was the one he bought. And the first plot that I did with Spider-Man had the black suit in it, and Rick Leonardi was the artist. And Rick looked at it and said, "You know what? We need to connect these legs here and that sort of stuff," and made some revisions on Mike Zeck's suit. And ultimately, that's what everybody used. They used Mike Zeck's original design, finessed by Rick Leonardi.
Wow,
but it had nothing to do with the webbing.
Go ahead, Mario.
Okay, 2 things. What did you think about the black suit in the television series in 1995, the animated, and in Spider-Man 3, the movie from 2007?
All right. I never really watched any of the cartoon series. Part of my other life, I did some animation work and that sort of stuff, and I, it's too much like work for me watching cartoons, so I tend not to do that. In Spider-Man 3, Spider-Man 3 had too much stuff shoved in there. It could have been like 2 or 3 good movies, but there was just too much shoved in. I thought a lot of the stuff that they handled with the black suit worked, and some of it didn't. Spider-Man 3, not my favorite of the Spider-Man movies, but not the worst of the Spider-Man movies. Actually, the best Spider-Man movie is Into the Spider-Verse.
Yes, of course. Of course.
And I just said I didn't watch too many cartoons. That one I loved.
It's amazing. Really,
it's amazing. And it's very lovely. It's with a good heart, and for all the family, it's a good introduction for Spider-Man, for Peter Parker, for the whole new generation. It's great.
It's great. Just a terrific film.
Yes.
Mr. Falco, also you are very known because of the Hobgoblin, a character that you did not create, but you were the one who mostly developed that character.
Well, I don't know if I mostly developed it. Roger Stern was the one who created it. He did a lot of development on it, and so did Bill Mantlo and all the writers. I know I had a lot of fun with the character, but I don't know if I can take credit for mostly developing it. But I had a lot of fun with him. He was a great character.
Mm-hmm.
But you developed all the plot about the secret identity and everything else.
A lot of that, yeah. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I had a lot of fun with the Hobgoblin.
And also, it's a new character, a new villain.
Yeah, told you, like new villains.
What do you think his most I don't know, most of the people like it more in some ways more than the Green Goblin?
I don't know. I think that it depends on how old you are and when you started reading comics. Old guys like me, we started with the Green Goblin, so the Green Goblin is the best. Young guys like you started with the Hobgoblin, so the Hobgoblin is best. Guys after us, they started with the Green Goblin again, or the Gray Goblin. I don't know, the Red Goblin, the Purple Goblin, whatever Goblin they got now, and that's the best. The thing with comic books is the golden age of comics,
or the new Goblin, or the new Goblin.
The golden age of comics is whenever you personally started reading them, because that's when the comics were always the best.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You also worked on this plot about a mini series of this new Green Goblin, and you developed a whole series and a new character for that series.
Yeah.
How did you come up with this series that it was supposed to be an ongoing, and it was like 13 issues, I think?
Well, I think I think somebody said, we should come up with the Green Goblin is really one of our most popular characters. Maybe we should bring him back and see if there's any way to do a series on him. And I think I said, well, the only way to do a series on him is if you develop the brand new Green Goblin. And they said, okay, do it. So I don't remember, how I came up with what I came up with, but I remember Phil Urich, and thought, hey, Scott, Phil, we're gonna give Ben Urich, who works for the Bugle, a nephew, who's kind of a slacker, and kind of a kind of a crummy superhero, but he'd be the superhero that I would be, kind of incompetent as a superhero, and thought, yeah, look, come on, let's have some fun. So, I'm always trying to, twist ideas around so that you think you're getting one thing, and yet you get something else.
The other one, Maximum Carnage, is one of the stories here in Argentina. It's a very difficult book to get. Yes, it's a difficult comic book to get to us, right?
Yeah, and also it's a story that, because of the difficult to find it, it's most wanted and most loved by Spider-Man fans in Argentina, and it's a long story. It's in some points with so many characters. I remember the time when I read it. It was like Avengers Endgame with so many characters. It was like a Roger Rambo for me.
Oh, it was a nightmare to plot that thing. All right, here's another boring story behind comics. So I'm writing. I think I was writing Thor, and I think I just started writing Fantastic Four. So, I used to be able to sleep, 5 hours a night. I'm down to 3 hours now. And Danny Fingroth is editing the Spider-Man books again, and he says, "Hey, how'd you like to write a brand new Spider-Man series?" And I said, "Danny, I just don't have time. I just really have no time." And he says, we're going to do something easy. You know, it's just, you know, it's going to be a quarterly book. You just have to do one story every 4 months. Come on, it'll be easy. You know, just relax. You get to tell some fun Spider-Man stories. It says, I know you love the character. It's a chance to dip your toes back into Spider-Man. What do you think? You know, one story every 4 months. And I said, yeah, I think I could probably do that. So I'm down to 2.5 hours of sleep a night. Sure, Danny. And the first story is the beginning of Maximum Carnage. I could have killed him.
You know, they developed a video game too about this story.
I know. They did develop the video game. Okay, in the course of my career, I've worked on a number of video games, and now I'm going to make a big confession. I've never owned a video game system, so I've never actually played any of the games I've worked on.
Separation anxiety was yours too?
I don't know.
Because it was a Spider-Man title.
Yeah, it was
a sequel. I think a sequel.
The sequel to Maximum Carnage.
Maximum Carnage.
I don't know. I'm terrible with the titles and stuff like that. But you know, I was given a copy of the Maximum Carnage game, and I gave it to my young nephew at the time. And you know, he's still my nephew, but he's not as young anymore. And at one point he said, "Oh, hey, by the way, I really enjoyed reading your comic." And my nephew, he loved playing video games. He would read The Punisher, maybe some Conan, none of the comic books that I did. And I said, I didn't know you were reading comic books now. She said, oh, it was on the game. And that's when I found out that they reprinted the comic book on the game.
Cover of the game.
And the first thing I did when I went in on Monday is to find out if they paid me my reprint rate on that.
Fun.
Continuing with Spider-Man, what can you tell us about this? I think I can tell it. This chaotic arc about called the Clone Saga.
The Clone Saga.
What can you tell us about the creative process? How you guys come up with this idea of the clone? What was the original idea?
I think the original idea came from a guy called Terry Cavanaugh. And Terry Cavanaugh, we, you know, every couple of months, all the Spider-Man creative people would meet in a room for a couple of days to figure out what they were going to do for the next 6 months, next year, whatever. And they came up with that idea, and they were very excited about it. And Danny came to me and he said, hey, we've got this idea for Spider-Man called the Clone Saga. And then he explained it to me. And I said, oh, Danny, you're telling me Peter Parker is not Peter Parker? I said, forget about it. We're not doing that. We're not doing that. And he said to me, but the guys are really excited about it. I said, I don't care how excited. It's a goofy idea. And he said, well, you know, I was supposed to come the next day to see the guys. I said, listen, you don't have to tell. I'll tell them. So I show up, and they look at me, and because as editor-in-chief, if there was one thing it was very consistent. Everybody knew what I was going to say before I said it. They understood. They understood how the operation went. And I said, guys, I just can't see this. And then they tried to explain to me why it was so important to do this story. And I saw the passion on the faces of the writers. It was Howard Mackey and Terry Cavanaugh and Mark DeMatteis and then Sal Buscema. who'd been in the industry forever, is passionately explaining to me why this was an important story, why we had to do it. And I'm looking at these guys and I'm thinking, if these guys are this excited about it, this passionate about it, the readers are going to be just even more passionate, more excited. They'll all be going crazy. They'll be saying, I'm going to give up Spider-Man forever. I'll never buy another Marvel comic. Crazy. I thought, okay, we have to do it. And I said, all right, but we got to figure out what happens to Peter Parker. Why would Peter Parker give up being Spider-Man and let this guy do it? I said, he's got to have a reason for leaving, and they say, well, it could get hurt. He could this. I said, no, we can't do that, because, so many of us have lived with Peter Parker for so many years. He has to have a happy ending. It's got to be something like he and Mary Jane are going off together because they're having a baby or something like that. And as I said that, Howard Mackey and Mark DeMatteis jumped up, high-fived, and paid and collected money from guys because they bet everybody that I'd come up with the plot that would I'd come up with the ending to their story that they needed.
The perfect ending for
the perfect ending.
The perfect ending.
All right, so and they didn't even split the winnings of that bet with me, the bastards. Anyway, that reminds me, they owe me money. Anyway, so we had this idea, and then I sat down with Danny. I said, okay, here's the basic, storyline. Now, we didn't know he was going to be called Ben Reilly at the time, but I said the clone shows up. Peter is shocked. They do tests. The tests prove that the clone is the original guy. Peter Parker is distraught. But he gets great news. Mary Jane is pregnant. They're going to go off and live happily ever after. The clone becomes the new Spider-Man. But then tragedy strikes. The clone is injured. He needs help. Peter has to come back. He's got to get back into costume. And then at the end, we find out the tests were wrong. Peter really is the real guy. And the clone is the clone. So Peter and Mary Jane and their baby, we have a married family Peter Parker book, Spider-Man. We're going to call the clone something else. We ended up the Scarlet Spider. Well, and he's basically a single Peter Parker. So for the people who wanted a single Peter Parker, we've got the Scarlet Spider thing that'll come out every month. For people who want a married Peter Parker with a baby, we have Amazing Spider-Man. We have 2 Spider-Man books, kind of what we did with Thor and Thunderstrike. Thor in the cosmic realm, Thunderstrike on Earth. War Machine and Iron Man would be, it was a, we tried it once, it worked, and we kept on trying it.
And now you mentioned it's something that they Marvel used with Brian Bendis in the later years with Miles Morales and Peter Parker.
Right.
So you had two Spider-Mans, one with Mary Jane and one that it's a teenager.
Yeah. You keep on doing that sort of thing in different ways.
You mentioned Thunderstrike, and we are watching all the stuff the Marvel did with the movies. Nowadays we saw something about Thunderstrike. What do you have an opinion about those kind of movies? Thor?
Oh, listen, I love the Marvel movies. I think most of them are terrific. Some of them are only good, but they're good. I am a big fan of the MCU movies. So many of them they were on such a run. I thought Thor Ragnarok was fabulous, and then you got Avengers Endgame and Captain Marvel and Black Panther. I mean, come on, these things are fabulous. I mean, I can't wait to see Black Widow, and I'm wondering what the heck they're going to do with the Eternals. Guardians of the Galaxy. When I heard they're doing Guardians of the Galaxy, I thought, what are they, crazy? Guardians of the Galaxy? And it was a terrific film. I loved it.
It's a great, one of the greatest movie at the MCU, and also the treatment of the movies, and nowadays in the treatment on the TV series and Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I think it's amazing, the treatment of that story, right?
Yeah, I've only seen the first 2 episodes of Falcon and Winter Soldier, and I thought they were, they had me on the edge of my seat. WandaVision. I remember watching the first episode, thinking, I have no idea what's going on here, but I don't care because this was a great sitcom, and I saw the whole thing, and again thought it was terrific. I'm a big fan of those things. I wish the DC movies were just as good, because I'm a comic book fan. I want all these things to be great.
Of course.
I just want to go and see a lot of fun goofball movies. Most of the time you go see James Bond. It's a fun goofball movie. Mission Impossible, Fast and Furious, the Marvel things, the DC thing. It's all the same, goofball stuff. Hey, let's have a good time.
Mr. Falco, since we are watching now the series and Disney Plus, where Walker is taking the shield of Captain America, would you like to see Masterson Thunderstrikes on a TV series?
Yeah, I would love to see what they did with Eric Masterson or Thunderstrike. I'd love to see it. I don't know if they actually will use Eric or Thunderstrike, but yes, I'd love to see it. At one point, Sony was talking about a Silver Sable movie.
Exactly.
Thinking, oh wow, that'll be cool, because they could. She's more complex, but they could do like a female James Bond film with her, I thought that would be great. It looks like it's not happening. At one point, they were talking about a new Warriors TV series. That would have been terrific, or a Night Thrasher TV series. I'd love to see what they do with these characters.
And also with She-Hulk.
The She-Hulk. They're going to do She-Hulk, a Moon Knight. I'm really looking forward to the Loki series. And I think they're going to be doing a lot more television for a while, just because it's easier to get it out there, and the risks aren't as big.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of Thor, why did you come up with Thunderstrike? Why this? We talk about this with Ron Friends, and he explained all this 90s look and everything, but I would like to hear your word about it.
Well, Ron and I, when we ended up being assigned Thor, we had a long talk about what we liked about Thor and what we didn't like about Thor, that sort of stuff. And we thought we needed a human component. So that's why we introduced Eric. And we thought, Thor, Thor is an aggressive guy. He's always getting into battles. He's always destroying buildings. So you want, Don Blake was a doctor, a healer. We didn't want to go back that far, so we said, you know what? We'll get an average guy who's an architect. He builds buildings that Thor is destroying and stuff like that. And the first time we meet Eric, he's actually injured because of a fight that Thor's having. That's when Eric first hurts his leg. And because our theory was, hanging around with superheroes and gods, not good for humans. And Ron and I always kind of figured that however this ends, it's going to end badly for Eric. So we always knew that at the end, Eric, from the start, we knew that Eric was going to die. So we wanted to make a character that our goal was that when he dies, it will break the readers' hearts. And what it ended up doing, it broke our hearts. And we, introduced Eric and had him hang around with Thor, and then eventually merged with Thor. And then we had a big battle with Loki, and Thor, with a speech that I hope broke readers' hearts, because he expressed his love for Loki right before he blew him away, or thought he was blowing him away. And then we realized, wait a minute, Thor's got to get punished for this. We thought, okay, we're going to put Eric in charge. And then, had Eric seemingly have the powers of Thor. And then we played with that for a while. And then, we were coming towards the end, and, what we thought would be the end of our run, or the end of the Eric thing. And the sales department came in and said, well, what ultimately happens with Eric? And I said, well, sadly, he's going to die. And they said, you can't kill him, but the book is selling great. Maybe you should spin him off into his own title. And I said, what? It's just spin him off into his own title. And that's when Ron and I started talking about, what are we going to call him? How is it going to be different from Thor? Blah, 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 blah. And I don't remember all the discussions. Most of the good ideas came from Ron. All the bad ideas came from me. Ron, came up with the look, and, Thunderstrike came out. And for a while there, Thunderstrike was outselling Thor.
Did you come up with a name? Because it's a powerful name, Thunderstrike.
Thunderstrike.
Yeah, I don't know who came up with the name. If it's a powerful, good name, Ron probably did.
Also, the weapon he carries, the mace, that mace is great.
Oh, that was all Ron. Ron figured that out.
Here, Gabriel Rojo says that
I actually have a Thunderstrike mace.
Oh,
you have?
It's in the corner down there.
Oh.
You want me to go get it?
Please.
Okay, if you want.
Yep.
Mientras tanto, le vamos a decir a la gente que gracias por el aguante que nos están haciendo.
Sí.
Sigan haciendo likes. Estamos pasando recontra bien, te digo. ¿Está pasando bien?
Sí. Es muy agradable ese Tom de Falco. Así que, gente, síguenle. Gracias, Gabriel, por el apoyo. Justo le iba a decir tu pregunta.
Ahí viene, mira.
No, mira.
No.
It's gorgeous.
It's got the chain and everything.
No.
Oh, no.
The only thing it doesn't have is the world still needs heroes.
Oh, it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous.
It is. Ron had this made. He had two. He had two of these things made. One for him, one for me.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
What a nice gesture. What a nice gesture.
Thank you, sir.
It's something very nice.
See, Ron Friends really is the greatest. He's the legend. You know?
Both, yeah.
Both are legendary. And then you got back to Spider-Man because what is that you most love of writing Spider-Man?
Well, I love Peter Parker. Spider-Man, I got kind of tricked into doing Spider-Man again. Marvel had hired this new writer, Todd DeZago, and they said he needed help with plots for a while. So Danny kind of conned me into doing plots for Todd. So I started to do the plots for Todd, and then they gave Todd a different book, and he was doing his own plots. So they needed somebody to do the book, and I ended up getting conned into doing it because I got to work with my buddy Sal Buscema, and Sal. Sal is another really great guy. I don't think Sal gets the credit that he deserves. Just a fabulous artist, and it was just such a pleasure to work with him on that book. And so I used to think, okay, so I'm working on a couple of other books, and I'm just relaxing, goofing around with Sal.
And then you got back with Ron because you got to write Hobgoblin Lives.
Oh no, that was Roger Stern did that.
Oh, Roger Stern. Yeah. And sorry,
I got back with Ron on Spider-Girl.
Spider-Girl. Sorry.
I was at one point Marvel was looking for was looking for something to assign me to do, so they assigned me this title called What If, and I was trying to figure out ideas for What If, and I thought, oh, you know what if Spider-Man had a Spider-Girl? And I came up with the idea, and I called Ron, and I said, Ron, I got this goofy idea for a story. And he said, Spider-Girl, why don't we call her Spider-Woman? And I said, there's been a dozen Spider-Women already. Forget, that's just you call it Spider-Woman, and we know it's already going to be, not going to sell. We're just going to try, Spider-Girl. And we worked the story out together. We thought this would be the one and only Spider-Girl story. And as Ron was finishing up, he said, I really like this character. You think we could do another one? And I said, Ron, it's a what if. In the history of what if, maybe there have been two or three sequels. I said, I guess maybe a year from now we could do something. I don't know. We'll talk about it a year from now. But what happened was it sold very well, and people reacted very well to that issue. And and Bob Harris, who was the editor-in-chief, came to me and said, so, we're thinking about doing some comic books, doing a 3-in-a-pack for Walmart. So we got to do 3 comic books. Would you like to do Spider-Girl and 2 other books connected to it? And I said, yeah, sure. And he says, you only have to do 12 issues of each. Can you do 12 issues? I said, yeah, sure. We started to, one of the books was the Avengers, the A-Next, and because that had, Yeah, that had Thunderstrike. Kevin Masterson in it. Ron wanted to do that. Got Pat Olive to do Spider-Girl and Ron Lim, the great Ron Lim, to do J2, which was the goofiest comic book you've ever read. And we started to do our 12 issues. And with Spider-Girl, they kept saying, yeah, this thing is still selling. Can you do 6 more? Can you do 6 more? And that went on for 13 years.
And I think the secret is it's this this sensation of legacy that you put on the book about Mayday becoming the new Spider-Man, but it's Spider-Girl, and all these secondary characters that you brought back to the story, like the Hobgoblin, like Norman Osborn, like Harry. I think that was a real the real deal.
Well, we made it into an enormous soap opera where we had a whole bunch of characters, and everybody in the supporting cast had their own stories, their own conflicts, and it was just a giant soap opera. And I think people got hooked into the soap opera, and came back every month just to see what was happening in Mayday's life. I thought it was interesting when we first started. They said, "Oh, it's about 15 years in the future," which was I think it was 2013, and we started getting all these negative reviews. It's set in the future, but where are the flying cars? And Ron and I had a discussion. He said, what's fashion going to be like 15 years in the future and stuff like that? I said, it's going to be the same thing as it is now. People are wearing T-shirts and jeans. I said, the only thing different, computers will probably be smaller. I didn't even think about cell phones at the time because, cell phones, were this big.
Like a brick.
Like a brick.
Yeah.
Like a brick. Like a brick.
Like a brick.
And I said that, these things are going to be smaller and that sort of thing. And I said, and everybody kept, complaining about the flying cars. On January 1st, 2013, Ron Friend called me up at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I answered the phone and he goes, "Where's my flying car?"
Sir, I want to ask you, we're talking about Spider-Girl, but I wanted to ask you about another character, a small family with four different characters. One is on fire, one is a thing, the other one it's a couple. So what about that? What can you tell me about that family?
You're talking the Fantastic Four or the Fantastic Five?
Well, the Fantastic Four.
The Fantastic Four. It was the Fantastic Four. I think Walt Simonson was working on the book, and had told the editor, that Ralph Macchio, that he was going to leave. And Ralph and I had been worked on Thor and a bunch of other projects over the years, and had established our relationship. I was the editor-in-chief, but Ralph was used to being my editor, telling me what to do. And Ralph said to me, he said, I think you and Ron would be great on Fantastic Four. I think you guys should come over and do Fantastic Four. And I said, well, I got to talk to Ron. And Ron, we were still doing the Eric Masterson thing at that time. And he said, I can't leave Eric. I just can't leave Eric. So I said to Ralph, I'm sorry, Ron can't leave Eric. I don't think I can leave Eric either. I was editor in chief and doing a bunch of things, And Ralph said to me, well, why don't you think about doing Fantastic Four without Ron? And I said, yeah, but Ralph, how can I do that? And somebody in a very snarky way said, yeah, there's no way DeFalco could write 2 comic books a month with all the other stuff he's doing. And because they said it in such a snarky way, I thought, could I do 2 books a month and still be editor-in-chief and stuff? And I'll confess, over the years, I've told you I'm very flighty. I do all sorts of different things. And I was doing, certain non-comic book work. And I said, maybe I could cut down on that stuff. It pays better, but, some of the stuff I like. I really enjoy doing. Some I don't enjoy that much. I'm going to get rid of the stuff I don't enjoy that much, even though it pays better. And I'll do 2 comic books a month. Because, hey, I'm only sleeping 4 hours. I had 4 full hours of sleep at night. So, I was good. And so I started writing Fantastic Four. And I found out my buddy Paul Ryan was going to be the artist. And I said to Paul, we're gonna come up with the wildest roller coaster ride in creation. We don't. Every month we're gonna take a twist and a turn, and it's just gonna be a wild ride. So just hang on. And then we geared up and we tried to, we just kicked into gear and threw everything in the kitchen sink into it, and no idea was too crazy, and we just had a blast on it. When we were on Fantastic Four, because we kept creating new villains, we were hearing a lot of negative things from the fans. When are you going to do Galactus? When are you going to do this? When are you going to do that? We eventually did them all, but we had to come up with new ways of doing them. And you gotta have Doom there. You need a bunch of Doom stories. But okay, we'll bring in Doom and then we'll kill him off. And not only that, we'll kill off Reed Richards too. What the heck? Nobody's gonna expect that.
Those 2 supposed deaths were very remembered because it were near the Onslaught event.
Right. And also, I always knew how they were coming back. And everybody thought, I'm trying to remember, was it Fantastic Four 400 was coming up, and everybody assumed that they would come back in issue 400. Everybody assumed, 400, they have to be coming back at 400. Oh, they have to be coming back at 400. But throughout the whole thing, I had Sue saying, I don't believe they're dead. I don't believe they're dead. And Sue kept saying, they're not dead. I would know if Reed was dead. They're not dead. And issue 400 comes, and Sue finally accepts they're dead. And everybody was outraged because I thought, they don't have to bring them back at 400. Your 400's going to sell no matter what we do. Got to bring them back at 405. That's the one that needs help.
Here, one of our subscribers are thanking you for the retconning of Alicia and Johnny's marriage.
Okay. That was actually an idea that Mark Rumwald and Ralph Macchio came up years before. I remember them talking about what if, how could we explain this away? And one of them said, what if Alicia was a Skrull? And they turned to me. And they turned to me and said, what do you think? And I said, I don't care. It's not my book. What do I care? I said, I'm reading. John Byrne was writing the book. I said, I'm reading what John is doing. I love what John's doing. I'm not trying to figure out how to ruin the marriage now. I didn't think the marriage made sense, but wasn't up to me. And then a couple of years later, suddenly I'm writing the book, and I thought, hey, I'm gonna pull out that idea. And I went to Ralph and I said, Alicia's a Skrull. He says, wow, that's a great idea. And I said, it's your idea. You came up with it, you and Mark. I was, I don't remember that, but it was Ralph Macchio and Mark Rumwell came up with that idea. Years later, I found out they had done something like that in Legion of Superheroes. I don't know if we did it first or they did it first, because I didn't read Legion of Superheroes, but fun and games.
Now, Mr. De Falco, changing of editorial subject, we're gonna speak about this. The New 52 and your involvement. How do you get into this reboot of DC in the 2011, I think? Yeah,
yes,
2011.
Somewhere along the line. I think Spider-Girl Spider-Girl, I think it had finally gone away, and Marvel, Marvel didn't have much use for me anymore. And Bob Harris was the editor-in-chief of DC, and was speaking to me and said to me, "Are you still interested in doing comics?" And I said, "Yeah, I don't know. It all depends on what it is, because like I said, I was doing other things." And then Bob at one point said, "How would you and Ron like to do something called Superman Beyond?" And then they sent me some reference, and I thought, yeah, we could have fun doing that. So Ron and I came up with a story for this Superman Beyond thing, and I guess it sold pretty well, and the guys at DC were pretty happy with it. And then they, I think the next thing I heard was, Brian Cunningham was the editor of Legion Lost, and he said, he was talking to Bob Harris, I need a new writer on it. And he says, well, who do you want? He says, well, I'd really like to get somebody like Tom DeFalco writing this book. And Bob Harris said, well, why don't you call DeFalco? And Brian said, could I do that? And Bob said, yeah, here's his phone number. So Brian Cunningham called me up and asked me if I'd be interested. And I said to him, I have to be honest, I've never read it. I don't read the Legion. I never read anything of the Legion. And he said, well, this is a new thing. And he sent me the comics, and Fabian Nicieza was doing it. Fabian's a friend of mine. So I called him up and I said, Fabian, I've been offered the book that you're writing. Are you leaving at a choice, or are you being forced off? Because if he was leaving at a choice, then I could take the assignment. If he was being forced off, then I couldn't take the assignment. I don't take assignments off buddies. And Fabian said, no, do it with my blessing. And he discussed a bunch of the ideas with me and that sort of thing. And I called Brian up and I said, hey, I'd love to do it. And I went out there and started to work on Legion Lost. And while I was working on that, every once in a while they'd come to me and say, could you do a fill-in for Nightwing? Could you do this? Could you do, at one point they asked me to do Superboy. And I just kept pitching in where I could pitch in. And I had some fun doing it. I really enjoyed working with Brian Cunningham. He's a terrific editor and a real gentleman. And then it was a lot of fun for a while, and then life got complicated outside of DC, and at some point I had to step back to deal with other complications.
Yeah, your issues of Superboy were very good. I remember that you got to write the issues with the crossover, the calling, and with the Legion Lost, also the calling, and got to introduce the crypto. You got a lot of fun with Superboy.
Well, I always try to have some fun with this sort of stuff. Um, you know, I, I it's Superboy was kind of frustrating to me because I really wanted to introduce a cast of characters around them, and there were too many other things going on, so I couldn't really get that cast in there.
Because you got in the title with the crossover Hell on Earth with Superman, I think.
Yeah, I got to. The nice thing is I got to play with a lot of DC characters. Batman was in that too, so I got to play a little with Batman and all the other characters. The DC characters are fun too.
What character did you or would you like to write and you didn't have the chance to?
I always wanted to do a long run on Captain America.
Oh.
I did get an opportunity one time to do it, but at the time I was just too busy with too many other things that I just couldn't leave. So I had to pass on that opportunity, and I always felt bad about it. But there's only so many hours in a day. Another character that the character that I approached Marvel that I really wanted to write was Conan the Barbarian. And I never got a chance to write Conan in comics. I think I did one story where he guest starred, but that's about my my opportunities with Conan the Barbarian.
Here's a similar question from subscriber Fernando Rosas. You wrote amazing comics for years. I love the Alien Suit saga, but do you have ideas that Marvel didn't let you use?
Oh, sure. Every writer has ideas that that you propose and that don't use. One of my ideas, Guardians of the Galaxy. I thought, man, that's a terrific title. We have to come up with something for that. And I noticed a bunch of every week, my guys would be sitting around talking about Star Trek, The Next Generation. And I thought, okay, so I'm going to come up with something called Guardians of the Galaxy, a whole new concept. So I worked on this concept for Guardians of the Galaxy, and I worked out a Bible for it. I had it all together, and before I could submit it, Jim Valentino came up with his proposal for Guardians of the Galaxy, and Mark Winwell said, "Hey, I got this proposal from Jim Valentino." So I said, "For Guardians of the Galaxy." I said, "You kidding me?" I said, I have a proposal too. And I said, let me read Jim's. So I read Jim's and I said, you know what? I like his better for Guardians of the Galaxy. Mine I'll call something else. And ultimately I used mine outside of comics for something else, but which worked out very well for me. And I think Guardians of the Galaxy worked out very well for Marvel. And Jim Valentino did a great job on that. One other time I worked on a proposal for Paladin, and I decided, I'm going to do Paladin the way you do a thriller novel, and I did this whole proposal, and put it aside, and the next day I'm on the train proofreading it, and I'm reading this thing, and I'm thinking, what was I thinking? This is way too violent to do as a comic book. So I rejected it before I turned it in. But yeah, everybody has ideas that, for one reason or another, don't make it in.
Would you like to write a Green Lantern, for example?
I don't.
Or Silver Surfer, something cosmic like you wrote on Thor.
Yeah, if I was going to do Green Lantern, I'd do like the old-fashioned kind of Green Lantern, where he keeps using the ring to form ridiculous giant objects. Because I think, this is a visual medium, and we have to have some goofy fun with this sort of thing. So come up with these crazy objects, giant punching bag,
a tank.
A tank. It's, a balloon. I don't know, whatever the heck whatever fits the story, but come up with these, ridiculous, cool visuals. And I don't think that would play to the audience today. I'm not sure the kind of comics that I like to do, are saleable today.
Well, Mr. De Falco, we're reaching the end of our interview. We don't want to bother you anymore. And well, here's a comment that says that you wrote with from friends in the art Captain America 383.
Okay, we did do a couple of Captain America stories. I think, I think that one starts off with the Captain America driving a motorcycle through a brick wall. But yeah, we did that. We also did Side by Side with the Howling Commandos, because Sergeant Fury number 13 had Captain America side by side with Captain America, and showed the Sergeant Fury group their side of the story. Ron Friends and I later did the Captain America side of the story. I've always thought those two stories should be reprinted together, but what can I tell you?
So we're gonna read 4 questions we got from the subscribers. I'm gonna read one. When one of them is similar to one I did before. That it's, what is you love about Spider-Man?
Peter Parker. He's just a great guy to spend time with.
If you had to give an advice to a writer to how to write Peter Parker or Spider-Man, what advice or tips would you give?
I would say, think of someone you know who is really a great person, but doesn't realize how great a person they are, and is always second guessing themselves. Somebody who can find the dark cloud behind every silver lining. And we all know people like that. People who just don't appreciate the wonderful, the wonder that is they. If I was going to tell anybody, there's one secret to writing, and it's not a secret. It's very obvious. If you want to be a writer, only write things that you care about. Because if you don't care about it, nobody else will. So make sure you care about it and care about it deeply. If you're writing a one-page Archie joke, you have to think this is a funny, funny joke. If you're doing a 5-page, Spider-Man story, you have to believe this is an important 5-page story. And what you're writing about is important, because again, if you don't, your readers won't. So care about what you're doing.
The second question we have here is, when did you decide you wanted to do Marvel Comics in a deliberately Silver Age style with great effects?
In the what style?
Silver Age style?
I don't know. I don't know if that was a conscious decision or that was just me, doing comics the way I thought they should be done.
Here's another one that says, do you think nowadays Marvel or DC has a lack of great editors?
I'm not all that familiar with the current crop of comic books because I'm not the market for them. I grew up on comic books that were, full of hoo-ha action and soap opera and stuff full of stuff. And the comic books today move a lot slower than my attention span can deal with. So I'm not the marketplace for today's comics. And when I was in the field, editors were trained. We used to have classes every week. We used to call them assistant editor classes that discussed the craft of comics, because we looked at it as a real craft. That there's a certain way to tell stories. There's a certain way of visually imparting information. And editors had the power to hire and fire their creative people. Editors today are a whole different breed. They don't have the power to hire and fire the creative people. That's made by other people. I don't know if they have access to the training that we did. And again, I'm not familiar with comic books on such an intimate basis.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that the editors today are doing the very best they can with the time they have available. Because so many of these guys are so overworked. They're doing like 10, 15 titles a month. I am in awe about the fact that they can do that much, get that much material out.
And Mario, you wanted to ask something?
No. He answered all my questions. So,
Well,
I have one. You mentioned Punisher right now, and would you do an adventure with the Punisher, or it's too violent, too violent? I don't know.
Well, I've always found the Punisher an interesting character because Spider-Man is basically a character born out of Jewish guilt, and the Punisher is a character born out of Catholic guilt. Stan Lee, Spider-Man, Jerry Conway, the Punisher. Like I say, I do things outside of comics, and the Punisher is kind of close to some of the stuff I've done outside of comic books. So, I think if given the chance, I would do, I take a shot at the Punisher, but it's not something that I want to do long range because the stuff out of comic books is a lot more fulfilling. Certain things work better outside of comics.
Right.
And finally, do you have any ongoing or future projects, Mr. Falco?
There are two projects that are coming out. One is going to come out this summer. It's called Mr. Right. It was something Ron Friends and I had worked on a bunch of years ago. We ended up putting it aside. We've decided to take it out now. It's with a publisher called Apex Comics, and it'll be coming out I think this July or something like that. It'll probably be the last time that Ron Friends, Sal Buscema, and I are all together, because I think Sal is has announced his retirement yet again, and I think that this time for real. So it's a hoo-ha action comic. All of our goofball things. If you like the stuff that Ron and I have done in the past, you trust me, you'll like this. So that's coming out in July. I have got another thing that I'm working on for a company called Sid Comics that Ron Friends works on, the Blue Baron. I'm working on a title called Headhunter, and I have no idea when that's coming out. And those are big 60-page comic books, all in one story. So that's basically, comic books for me. I realized that in 2022, it'll be 50 years in the business. Which
we have a celebration, right?
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, why not?
The only celebration is that's when I might finally pull the plug and people will be celebrating. At least we finally got rid of this bum. So
you can have a celebration with the Thor hammer in your house. Why not?
Yeah, I guess I can. But I was really, wow, yeah. I joined in 1972. It's going to be 50 years. So it's kind of cool.
It's amazing, Mr. Falco, and we're so proud of have you here and so grateful to have you here. So we'd like to thank you for your kindness of answer all our questions and all our subscriber questions, because there were a lot. We have a great time. I don't know you, Mario, but we had some time, a funny time with Mr. Falco.
Yes. I absolutely. I'm thrilled because he's a great hero for us, because we talking with him about all of you, and you are our truly heroes, because not Spiderman, not Superman, no Batman, no, you, the man behind the stories. So, and we grew up with all of you. So thank you, sir. Thank you so much, because all the stories, all the adventures were touching for us. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I really do appreciate it. It's nice to be remembered. Working in comics was a thrill for me. It was a great pleasure, and it was a privilege. And I was so honored to work with so many wonderful people over the years, especially Ron Friends and Ron Lim and Paul Ryan and Herb Trimpe and Sal Buscema and Steve Ditko. So many good buddies, so many great people. Larry Hama. I had a great time, and I love this medium. I love this craft, and it's a pleasure to be able to talk about it on occasion. So thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. Hoo-ha!
Well, thanks a lot, Mr. Falco, again. And we're gonna say goodbye in Spanish. And Mario, muchas gracias por acompañarme. Muchas gracias a todo el chat y a los suscriptores. Ya saben, dejen su like, suscríbanse. Este contenido de calidad lo hacemos para ustedes, y la verdad que es un placer tener a to the legendary Mr. De Falco. So
can we say some catchy phrase to finish?
Yeah.
Someone from one of your editors. Excelsior.
Okay. Excelsior.
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 See you around.
See you. Thank you.